Confession time. Last night I really fucked up. I went home with every intention of engaging in some self-care. I knew one night of self-care was not going to offset 10 days of emotional drainage. I may be hopeful and motivated, but I'm not delusional. I went home, I fixed dinner, I drew a relaxing bath, soaked while catching up on my Netflix queue, and the more I tried to force myself to relax, the more unsettled my mind became. Something about telling myself, willing myself to relax, just made it worse. Go figure. So I ended the bath and decided to try something else. I love to read. I could read for days. I curled up on the couch and started a new book. It only took me about 20 times reading the first page before I admitted to myself that reading wasn't the thing. At this point, I'm getting frustrated. I had the house to myself and no obligations. Perfect, quiet night for some self-care, just like I talked about yesterday. And I couldn't think of a damn thing to do. I racked my therapist's brain to think of self-care activities, and I finally ended up on Google. Gotta say, not a great feeling that something I work with almost daily somehow just left my brain. I looked at this list of 124 self-care activities and picked a few to try. Took no longer than 10 minutes for me to realize the futility of this exercise. So, I'm sitting in my living room with nothing to do, nowhere to be, nobody asking for anything, a night full of possibilities. I could have gone anywhere and done anything. Instead, I looked around the room. On the table was my intervention binder. Remember that just yesterday I said I was fatigued from working this plan that I created, this intensive recovery process designed to rejuvenate me and restore me to better mental health. And for some reason, in that moment, instead of reminding myself to be gentle, to take a break, to give myself much needed respite, I decided the reason I couldn't turn off in self-care was because I actually wasn't working hard enough. I needed to do more. Like a sailor lured out to the choppy seas by the call of the siren, I opened that damn binder, pulled out one of my fancy fountain pens with my favorite color ink, and started an exercise. An exercise I wasn't ready for. An exercise that should have waited a few days or maybe even a few weeks. But I was determined to make more progress, to make the most of this forward momentum. And then it happened. I didn't just struggle with the exercise, that would seem easy. I didn't have an aha moment, that would be too convenient. What I had was an emotional reckoning with something about myself I had been holding in for weeks and weeks. Something I didn't give myself permission to think, much less say out loud. But I thought it. And then I muttered it. And then I said it out loud. And then I kept saying it out loud to myself until I was almost screaming it with anger and rage and frustration and hurt and sadness. If you're not familiar with catharsis, it's the process of releasing and thereby getting relief from strong or repressed emotions. When you're utterly frustrated, you just scream into the wind and then you feel better. Catharsis. Finally feeling better after trashing that box of things your ex left behind? Catharsis. Got pent up anger and annoyance that you exercise at a rage room, which I haven't had a chance to try yet, but it's on my self-care list. Catharsis. That feeling of peace and calm that comes after journaling? Yep, catharsis. So you would think this screaming my truth would be a cathartic moment. Oh, how I wish. Instead, I kept processing the reality of the statement, the reality of the harsh truth I had been denying myself. And all of a sudden, it made so much sense why I had been having some particular struggles the past few weeks. This is normally when someone would phone a friend or meet up for coffee, share the struggle, get some perspective, get some support, talk it out. But I didn't do that. This is normally when I would engage in some of my former self-sabotage behaviors, the things I know provide relief in the moment, even if I'm going to feel just as bad, if not worse, later. If you've ever had experience with habitual self-sabotaging behavior, you know just how hard it can be to resist those urges. They quickly spiral from fleeting thoughts to actual cravings to intrusive thoughts you can't shut off. No matter how hard you try, your brain just goes there. For some people, it's food. For others, it's substances. For some, it's retail therapy. Might be inappropriate sex or gambling. Anything that provides a sense of relief in that moment, even though you fully know it's going to be worse later, spinning around in your head. After hours of this, I didn't give in. I won't say that I was successful in blocking those thoughts. I just pushed through. See, I didn't have any other good outlet. So I stewed, and I stewed, and I stewed until the wee hours of the morning. In my experience, people will tell you to call anytime, no matter what. The phone is always there, right next to me, whatever you need. But nobody actually means that. Nobody actually means for you to call them at 2 in the morning because you can't sleep and your mind is reeling from this revelation you just dropped on yourself and all the ways you want to upend your life. I probably do have people I could call any time of the day or night, but in that moment I wasn't thinking that. I was feeling very isolated, very alone, very scared, very emotional, and very much a failure. And that's a lot for anybody to feel all by themselves. So, yeah, bit of a fuck up. Despite all my talk yesterday about being gentle with myself, I was anything but gentle. I was anything but kind. Now, in the calmer light of the day and having had some sleep, I get to reflect on why I set myself up for failure last night. Early on, I talked about self-sabotage. I talked about identifying triggers and how we can actually trigger ourselves by placing ourselves in certain situations or exposing ourselves to certain things. That's exactly what I did last night. I put so much pressure on myself to engage in prescribed self-care that I didn't stop to consider that maybe, just maybe, I didn't quite need that level of intentionality. What I mean by that is maybe, just maybe, all I needed was to do something fun or relaxing without having to therapize it as a self-care ritual to aid in my well-being. I got so focused on this recovery process and making progress towards the goals I identified that I forgot all the other things that I am. I forgot that I am more than someone with depression and anxiety working on improving my feelings. I forgot that I'm more than a boyfriend working on a relationship to get to a place of reconciliation. I forgot that I'm more than a therapist and a caretaker. I got so distracted in my zeal to self-improvement that I forgot to just accept myself as I am and to give myself space and grace to just fucking be. Admittedly, part of how I got there was a certain stubbornness. I said in the second video, the baseline video, that my doctor prescribed an antidepressant, an anxiety medication, and a blood pressure medication. I'm taking the antidepressant faithfully. But I decided that yesterday, which I knew was going to be an anxiety-provoking day for several reasons, I decided yesterday I didn't need the anxiety and blood pressure medication. I entered that space of what we call non-compliance with treatment, a thing I caution clients about all the time. And I did it because I was doing so well and making so much progress and had so much forward momentum that I thought it was time to stop relying on medication as a crutch. And that's a big fucking problem because it's not a crutch, it's a treatment. If I had a massive infection, would I think antibiotics are a crutch? No. If I had diabetes, would I think insulin is a crutch? Nope. Medications are treatment for diagnosable conditions. And I have a diagnosable condition for which a medical expert has prescribed a treatment. And me, thinking I knew better because after all, I am an expert in mental health and human behavior, I made a choice. Not a great one. And that set the stage for what happened last night. I was already anxious when I tried to force myself into self-care. And yes, self-care activities can be used to reduce anxiety. There are lots of behavioral techniques that reduce anxiety. They can be very effective, but not at the level of anxiety I've been dealing with. So basically, I set myself up for failure. I knew my triggers, and I created a situation whereby my triggers would be activated. And this time I activated a big one with an exercise I wasn't ready to do. I wasn't emotionally prepared for. So, I have a few takeaways from this. First, people really should take their medication as prescribed if they want to function at their best. Second, I really should quit holding myself to such a high standard for my recovery. I would not have expected this level of progress from anybody on my couch. And no way I would have pushed them to do even more. Hell, I probably would have tried to slow them down a bit to prevent recovery burnout. Third, I need to remind myself that although this is my recovery, I don't have to do it all on my own. I'm allowed to ask for help. I should ask for help. Lastly, I need to remember that I am more than my job. I am a human being who has real experiences and real struggles just like anybody else. I'm allowed to go on this journey, however winding the road is, for however long it takes. I am not a failure in this. I am in recovery. So that's where I'm at today. I'll be back tomorrow.